I'm Stacy Wong, Commercial Insights Director at Amgen, and my co-presenter today is Chris Memrosh, a principal at ZoomRx. Thank you for joining us today for our session called The Future of Chart Audits is Conversational AI. The goal for our session today is we'll highlight some of the challenges that we faced at Amgen when doing a more traditional quant survey methodology, and what we were really testing as we were partnering with ZoomRx and piloting out the Patients Scribe platform that they have. We also have a video clip from our actual project, and it will give you a flavor of conversational AI in action. And we'll wrap it up with some of our learnings and our takeaways comparing the two methodologies. Before I get into those challenges, I wanted to highlight some of the AI integration movements that we've been doing at Amgen. Typically, when we think of pharma and changing our ways of working, we're usually as fast as a 100-year-old tortoise, maybe even slower. So surprisingly, our CEO opened up his wallet, bought our tortoise a Bugatti, and we have been on that gas pedal so hard since last summer when we were all given enterprise ChatGPT access. So since then, we've had two specific initiatives that are closer to home. One is called Market Research Agent. The thought on that is to incorporate all of our quant data as well as our qual transcripts and help my team better integrate the data as well as find that red thread across all of our PMR projects. Ultimately, MR Agent will ladder up into a bigger initiative and really a brain child here, a term called Neural Nexus. So it's not just at PMR, but now we're taking all of the insights across all of the cross-functional pillars at Amgen, feeding it into Neural Nexus, and we'll be doing data integration and red threading at an even higher degree. And so when we think about all the experimentations that we have done with our LLMs of choice, we've all quickly discovered that our GPTs are only as good as the data we feed it. So moving into MR Agent, it is really of high essence that we are feeding it high caliber data. So at Amgen, why are we conducting chart audits? Probably on a similar reason for all of you guys. Along with chart audits and our ATUs and our Salesforce effectiveness trackers, we're basing our KPIs and our leading indicators out of these. And if our brands have the luxury of history and a strong volume of patient charts, we get to do fun things like make patient and prescriber profiles. But at Amgen, what we primarily are using our chart audits to do is get at that more granular level that our claims and our sales data can't get at. More specifically, we're looking at new patient shares across condition severities and lines of therapy, and we're also monitoring what our competitors are doing that are impacting our shares. All right. From my experiences with chart audits, especially for our brands that have a robust claims data set, the actual traditional quantitative methodology will get the job done just fine. But for oncology and for rare disease, I was finding that we were making a lot of trade-offs in order to meet our target sample sizes that was really jeopardizing our data quality, insights, and recommendations. We also saw that we were inadvertently creating a negative cycle as our targets were getting harder to recruit into our chart audits. When we did get them as a captive audience, we were pushing more why and what text boxes at them in order to just get as much information as we could. That obviously adds more time to each chart that they're filling out, and it's probably leading to shortcuts that they're making to save time, as in not actually referring to the patient charts and just free memorying what the values are. But the trouble is, we all still need our 50 unique prescribers, our 150 patient charts. So what we end up doing is lowering our our screening criteria. We start allowing those lower tier doctors, and we start allowing even respondents who aren't even on our target list. And we get back to MR agent needing that high caliber data. I'm no longer passing that red face test of data accuracy. So as a team, we decided we really need to explore different methodologies for collecting our chart audit information. So we partnered up with ZoomRx in order to explore their conversational AI platform called Patients Scribe. We actually used it to pilot on 2 of our oncology conditions. The first one is acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL for short. We actually already had a traditional quant survey in place, so we were able to actually parallel both surveys and both methodologies at the same time. For ALL, the challenge that we were really trying to tackle was whether Patients Scribe in this conversational AI methodology would it actually entice our more higher tier and busier doctors into taking our chart audits. Would we also be able to get more on-target list respondents into our survey? For our second test was with our gastric cancer patients. Not patients, but with a gastric cancer indication. It was actually a pre-launch, so we were testing a couple of things like incidence rates. Could we actually get a lot of gastric cancer oncologists into the study? But also we were challenging to see, like, biomarkers is probably one of the hardest things to validate, whether they're actually going on multiple screens to get to, was the biomarker test ordered? What were the results? And so we wanted to see if Patients Scribe, being a more kind of fluid methodology, would actually make it more natural for the prescriber to actually reference patient charts as they were filling out the chart audit survey. And to actually learn more about Patients Scribe and actually show you that patient clip, or the project clip, I'm going to pass it off to Chris.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. So what we're going to cover here, now that we understand the problem that we're trying to solve, is going to be the solution, or the execution of the research using the Patients Scribe methodology. At ZoomRx, we are doing a lot of work in AI, and survey as a conversation is one area of exploration. Within survey as a conversation, when we apply the technology to patient chart audits, we call that Patients Scribe. Really, the goal here is to allow physicians to participate in a study through conversation rather than through a traditional quant survey of checkboxes and text fields, et cetera. The goal of Patients Scribe is to collect that qualitative depth at quantitative scale. Traditional chart audits do a really great job at some aspect of the research, right? They're really good at gathering the basic facts. You'll understand the patient demographics, comorbidities, treatment history, products considered, maybe prescription of a new product. Those all need to stay in our solution. We can't lose any of the fidelity there. But we also need to gather additional clinical context. Often that is lacking in the traditional chart audits that we see. If we can gather that additional clinical context, we have a better data set, better analysis, better insights, recommendations, and actions taken by Stacy's team. So how this works is we start with a survey, right? A questionnaire, as you're used to developing, and we train the AI on that questionnaire. So it puts some guardrails in place. It informs the AI around how the discussion should flow. While that discussion is happening with the physician, the system is structuring the data in the back end and comparing the responses to our knowledge graph. By doing that, the system understands where do we have complete information and we can move forward in the conversation, where do we need to circle back, right? And make all of this feel like a natural experience for the physician. Because this is run in our platform, because this is conducted by AI, we are able to get those large sample sizes that Stacy is talking about. So in these 2 pilots that we ran in October, we collected over 350 charts in the month of October, coming from the target list with those emphasis on high decile, high value physicians. So what we'll do now is we'll spend 2 minutes to see what this looks like in action. So the screen is the screen that the physician sees when they are participating in the research. And this is a real chart that was collected. So this is one of the 350 that we collected We're not going to go through the entire chart, but just a couple of snippets to give you a sense of the functionality. This is for a first-line gastric cancer patient, and we have a voice actor just to protect PII for the physician.
Let's begin with the interview. What is the patient's age?
Patient is 57 years old, male, Caucasian, 174 pounds in weight, 5'7" tall. Patient's ECOG score was 1.
What insurance plan is the patient on?
Medicare.
How long ago was the patient diagnosed with this disease?
Let me look at the chart to give you that info. Patient was diagnosed about 6 months ago.
Which of the following comorbid conditions does the patient have?
GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, COPD, anemia.
What was the status of biomarkers when 1L therapy was initiated?
CDL1 was greater than 1 but less than 5. Stable MSS. CLDN 18.2 was negative.
What are your top goals when choosing the first-line treatment for the patient? How do you typically prioritize between efficacy and safety when considering these goals?
Prolongation of survival and progression-free survival with preserved quality of life are my top goals. Safety always has to be considered in an incurable disease. However, without efficacy, there's no success.
How confident were you that the product would satisfy your goals, and how did you gain that confidence?
We'd chosen the regimen, which included oxaliplatin, 5-FU, and leucovorin combined with Keytruda. Moderately confident because of this particular patient. For biomarkers, the only actionable one was PD-L1, and the others were negative. I have treated dozens and dozens of patients based on these biomarkers, and I have a certain degree of personal confidence in doing that.
Okay, so that gives you a sense of some of the functionality there. You see the system structuring the data that the respondent provided. You see that a respondent can give answers to multiple questions, even unprompted, and the system will identify where that information resides. We're going to quickly look at a brief summary of the benefits of this approach that we observed at ZoomRx. We then will hear from the physicians themselves, and then I'll turn it back over to Stacy to share the Amgen perspective. From the ZoomRx perspective, analyzing these charts, we did see reduced HCP burden. We know physicians are used to dictating their notes around patient charts. We also know that physicians generally understand what type of information we're seeking when they're participating in a chart audit study. And consequently, physicians will often rattle off many bits of information that are valuable. You saw in the beginning of this video, the physician in about 10 seconds cleared what would have been 6 or 7 screens in a quantitative survey. We also found that many of our participants were returning to give us that second or third chart, which we use as an indicator that they found the approach to be viable. The level of insights were, we believe, more comprehensive than a traditional approach. It's illustrated a little bit in this towards the tail end of the video, but it certainly was evident across the sample that physicians became comfortable fairly quickly. They were elaborating on questions without really thinking about it. So that is absolutely what we're aiming for. We're aiming to get more data, more information out of these respondents so that we can provide better insights to our clients. And the data sets that are delivered to our clients are not only the quantitative data set that everyone's used to receiving, but now you also have a transcript. That transcript informs the work that we're doing today. It also can be fed into your AI so that it'll live on indefinitely. Lastly, when it comes to quality data, we did collect, again, from the target list, focus on those high decile physicians, but we saw that some of the charts that were being reported in this study were emphasized towards more of the complex patient in sequences than what was observed in the parallel traditional study that was being run. In the parallel study, there were, in oncology, a lot of chemo-only charts that were being reported, and as a result, the shares that were found in the research were not necessarily lining up with secondary sources or what was believed to be the case in the market. With Patients Scribe, we found more accurate representation of the shares because we were getting more of those later line patients with more complex sequences. So now switching to the physician, we'll first start with a quote that I think does a nice job on hitting on some of the key points here. Voice-powered Patient Scribe works much faster and efficiently than traditional surveys. I'm able to give a much more detailed and complete response in a much shorter period of time, so I'm likely to get more information into my answers. At the end of the chart, we surveyed the physicians about their experience. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you see that 60% of our participants told us that they gave more clinical detail using Scribe than they would have in a traditional chart audit study. This is exactly what we were aiming for. We were very happy to see that over half of our respondents believe that that was the case. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have client engagement and did they enjoy the experience. You see here very high numbers. Physicians did appreciate the approach to collecting charts. They did not. We also had a head-to-head against kind of the traditional approach, and they found that this was more enjoyable than the traditional approach, which can oftentimes be painful. So now I will turn it back over to Stacy to share the Amgen point of view on the research.
Thank you, Chris. So when we decided that we wanted to do a conversational AI methodology, we were really hoping that it would be an easier, more natural flow for them as they were going through the chart audit survey. Because at the end of the day, kind of wanted to make chart audits great again. And we heard from Chris's test previously that our respondents did give us that positive indicator, but here's the real proof. In our ALL study, we actually did see a 10% boost in our tier A and B targets coming into Patients Scribe. We also saw that 70% of our patient charts were being filled out from on-target list respondents versus 30% in our traditional methodology. When it comes to data quality, we heard in the video clip, as well as from multiple other respondents, that they were telling us as they were going through Patients Scribe, they were actually referring to the patient chart, actually going back and forth in order to give us that credible data that we're really trying to seek and validate we're getting. But since we're in pharma, here's the fair balance on it all. So in the ALL study, even though we got that boost in higher targets and in more on-target list respondents, at the end of the day, when we looked at our new patient shares in first-line ALL, we actually saw very similar numbers in both of the methodologies. Usually, we're all celebrating that there was no trend break when we're changing methodologies and vendors, but in this instance, I wanted to see a huge trend break, right? And so really what I'm seeing out of this, because we are getting those high value doctors who are supposed to give us a lot more volume of our brands, is actually triggering a conversation, maybe uncomfortable, that I'm gonna have to have with my analytics team that our target list is actually not differentiating enough between our high and our low targets. But ultimately, what I'm really was the bonus out of conversational AI was the richness and the depth of the insights we were getting from the Y probes. Yes, we could have eliminated the Y probes in the quant version in order to cut off time, but if they're enjoying talking to us, why not get those extra Y probes in? And so what we're seeing was a more complete thought process around their decision making, and also really clear insights behind what are the true drivers and barriers as they're considering each of the treatment options that they have in front of them. Now when I have to pass that red face test at the beginning I was talking about, I'm feeling a lot more confident that the data I'm inputting into MR Agent is of high caliber and can be better integrated with all the other Amgen insights so that we're leading to more strategic direction for our stakeholders, and ultimately better serving our patients who will now get more access to our medicines. And to final words, I'll pass it back to Chris on.
Cool. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, so just to close us out, in summary, we did find that the Patient Scribe solution was one where the physicians were more engaged and more likely to return, and we were more likely to attract and retain those higher decile physicians. We did find that the insight depth was improved and overall data quality was superior to the traditional approach. So we're exploring this further at ZoomRx. We've been doing this Patient Scribe approach for, I think, a little over 6 months now, maybe 8 or 9 months. We're taking this forward not only within patient charts. We started with charts because it made sense, because physicians are used to dictating, because physicians understand what information we're seeking, because there are not a lot of rating scales in a chart audit study, for example. But we are exploring other areas, so potentially patient journeys could be a place where we think this can have application. And there can be pockets of this survey as a conversation, maybe in an ATU or a promotional effectiveness tracker. It's not going to be the entire study, as it is for our charts, but it can provide value in pockets in those types of research.